The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure ever built by the Galactic Council. It floated in orbit around the neutral world of Varanthos Prime, a massive ring of metal and glass where the 12 elder species gathered to decide the fate of entire civilizations. Today, in the year 2347 by Earth's calendar, humanity's fate would be decided. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the hall. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind her sat the human delegation, 30 men and women in simple dark suits. They had traveled for weeks to reach this place. They had prepared for months. They had hoped for years. Around them, arranged in towering seats that rose toward the ceiling, sat the representatives of the elder species, the Valanthi with their silver scales, the Keth with their many eyes, the Thessians with their flowing robes, and 9 other species, all ancient, all powerful, all watching the humans below, with expressions that ranged from boredom to quiet amusement. Elena had done this before. She had stood in this same spot 5 times over the past 20 years. Each time, she had presented humanity's case for full membership in the Galactic Council. Each time, she had been denied. But this time felt different. This time, humanity had more to show. Honored members of the Council. Elena began, her voice steady. 80 years ago, humanity first made contact with the galactic community. We were young. We were inexperienced. We knew nothing of the stars or the species that lived among them. You accepted us as observers, and we were grateful. She touched a device on her wrist, and images appeared in the air above her holographic displays showing human achievements across Council space. In those 80 years, we have tried to prove ourselves worthy of your trust. Our doctors developed the cure for the Thessian plague. 3 billion lives saved. The image showed Thessian children, healthy and smiling, in hospitals staffed by human medical teams. Our engineers built the void gates that now connect your worlds. Travel that once took decades now takes days. The image shifted to show the massive ring structures that bent space itself, human designs that had transformed galactic commerce. Our soldiers have defended Council borders against raiders and pirates. Our merchants have opened trade routes. Our artists have shared our culture. Our scientists have worked alongside yours in the pursuit of knowledge. Elena lowered her hand, and the images faded. We do not ask for charity. We ask only for recognition. We ask to be called equals. We ask for a seat at this table, so that we might continue to serve not as outsiders, but as partners. She stopped speaking and waited. The hall was silent. The elder species looked at each other. Some whispered in languages Elena did not understand. Others simply stared at the humans with unreadable expressions. Finally, High Arbiter Kethal rose from his seat. He was the leader of the Valanthi Dominion, the oldest and most powerful species in the Council. His scales were dark with age, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. The Council has heard humanity's petition, he said. We have considered your contributions. We acknowledge that humans have been useful. Elena felt her heart beat faster. Useful. It was not the word she had hoped for. However, Kethal continued, the Council has decided that humanity is not yet ready for full membership. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Not yet ready. After 80 years. After everything they had given, humans are too young, Kethal explained, as if speaking to a child. Your species has existed for merely a fraction of the time the elder races have walked among the stars. You are too volatile, too emotional, too quick to anger and too slow to understand the delicate balance of galactic politics. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Perhaps in another century, Kethal said, humanity will have matured enough to be trusted with the responsibilities of Council membership. Until then, you will remain observers. This is the Council's final decision. He sat down. Elena did not move. She did not speak. She simply stood there, processing what she had heard. Then, from the seats of the Keth Collective, Delegate Zorvan spoke. He was known for his sharp tongue and his dislike of younger species. The humans should be grateful, he said. His many eyes blinking in what Elena had learned was amusement. We allow them to exist in council space at all. We permit them to trade, to travel, to serve. Many species would consider this a great honor. Perhaps the humans have forgotten their place. Laughter filled the hall. Not human laughter, a hissing, clicking sound that the elder species made when they found something amusing. Elena had heard it before. It meant contempt. The human delegation sat in silence. Some of them had clenched fists. Some had red faces. But not one of them spoke. Not one of them moved. Elena looked at Zorvan. She looked at Kethal. She looked at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her, waiting for her to beg, to argue, to show the emotion they expected from such a young and volatile species. She did none of these things. Instead, she simply nodded. One small movement of her head. Earth acknowledges the Council's decision, she said. Her voice was flat, calm, empty of any feeling at all. She gathered her documents from the podium. She turned and walked back to the human delegation. She nodded to them, and as one, they rose from their seats. Without ceremony, without protest, without a single word of complaint, the humans walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence of the hall. Delegate Zorvan laughed again. "Look at them retreat," he said. "Like children sent to their rooms." More hissing laughter followed. The humans did not react. They did not turn around. They simply walked through the massive doors and disappeared. The council watched them go with mild interest. Then, within minutes, they returned to their agenda. There were trade disputes to settle, border conflicts to discuss, and 1,000 other matters more important than the feelings of a young species that had not yet learned its place. No one noticed when the human vessels detached from Varanthos Station. No one paid attention as they powered up their engines and turned toward the distant light of Sol. No one heard the silence that followed the complete absence of any farewell transmission, any diplomatic protest, any request for reconsideration. The humans simply left. And in that silence, in that quiet departure that asked for nothing and demanded nothing, the first crack appeared in the foundations of the Galactic Council. But the elder species did not see it. They would not see it for a long time. And by the time they did, it would be far too late. The Galactic Council expected anger. They expected protests, demands, and threats. They expected the humans to send strongly worded messages and call for emergency meetings. They expected all the things that young and emotional species did when they did not get what they wanted. Instead, they received paperwork. 3 days after the assembly, the Thessian Medical Institute received a formal notice. It was written in perfect diplomatic language, polite and professional. It stated that all human doctors, researchers, and medical staff would be ending their service in 30 days. It thanked the Thessians for the opportunity to work alongside them. It wished them well in their future endeavors. The notice was signed by Dr. Sarah Chen, who had led the team that cured the Thessian plague 15 years ago. The Thessian administrators were confused. They sent messages asking for clarification. They asked if there had been some misunderstanding. They received a simple reply. There was no misunderstanding. The humans were leaving. All research data that belonged to humanity would be leaving with them. This was permitted under Section 47 of the Observer Species Agreement, which stated that observer species retained full ownership of their intellectual property. The Thessians had written that agreement themselves, centuries ago. They had never imagined anyone would actually use it. Similar notices arrived across Council space. Human engineers at the Void Gate stations submitted their resignations. They offered to train Council technicians before they left, but they warned that full training would take years. The Council technicians had always relied on humans to handle the complex maintenance. They had never bothered to learn the details themselves. Human security contractors aboard Council stations began packing their belongings. Human merchants rerouted their trade ships away from Council ports. Human translators, artists, teachers, and workers of every kind quietly informed their employers that they would not be returning. No one shouted. No one argued. No one demanded explanations or compensation. They simply filed the proper forms, followed the proper procedures, and prepared to leave. On Varanthos Prime, A young Valanthi named Yelen Sorath worked as a junior archivist in the Council's Hall of Records. Her job was to organize data and identify patterns that the senior officials might find useful. It was boring work, but Yelen was good at it. She was the first to notice that something was wrong. It started with trade reports. Yelen was reviewing the quarterly numbers when she saw that human merchant ships had decreased by 40% in Council space. She checked the medical supply data and found that shipments of human pharmaceuticals had dropped by half. She looked at the defense reports and discovered that human security vessels had withdrawn from 12 frontier stations. Yelen compiled her findings into a report. She calculated that 34% of the Council's pharmaceutical supplies came from human sources. 28% of precision manufacturing depended on human factories. 40% of frontier defense had been provided by human contractors. She brought the report to High Arbiter Kethal himself. The old Valanthi barely glanced at it. "You worry too much, young one," he said. "The humans are having a tantrum. They are upset that we did not give them what they wanted. This behavior is typical of emotional species. They will calm down in a few months and return to their duties." "But sir," Yelen said, "the withdrawal appears to be systematic. They are following every legal procedure perfectly. They are not breaking any agreements. They are simply ending them." Kethal waved his hand dismissively. "Let them end what they wish. The Council existed for 10,000 years before humans crawled out of their caves. We will exist for 10,000 more after they crawl back in. They need us far more than we need them, do they?" Yelen asked quietly. Kethal's eyes narrowed. "Know your place, Archivist. The humans will return. They always do. Emotional species cannot sustain grudges. It is not in their nature." Yelen bowed and left, but she did not stop watching the data. Weeks passed. The human withdrawal continued, quiet and steady like water draining from a basin. There were no dramatic announcements. No final confrontations, just departure after departure, resignation after resignation, ship after ship turning toward the border of human space. The Council noticed, but they did not worry. The elder species had seen younger races throw tantrums before. The Keth Collective had once refused to attend council meetings for 50 years over a trade dispute. The Thessians had threatened to withdraw from the alliance 3 times in the past century. These things happened. They always resolved themselves eventually, but the humans were different. The Council did not realize this yet, but the humans were very different. The humans did not threaten. They did not make demands. They did not leave doors open for negotiation. They simply left. On the final day, the last human vessel prepared to cross out of Council space. It was a small transport ship carrying the remaining human workers from the outer stations. Its captain, a tired-looking woman named Rodriguez, received a transmission from the Border Patrol. "Human vessel, state your destination and purpose." Captain Rodriguez looked at her crew. They looked back at her. Some of them had spent decades working in Council space. Some had made friends among the alien species. Some had built lives there, but none of them had been allowed to call it home. "Our destination is Sol," Rodriguez said. "Our purpose is to go home. Will you be returning?" Rodriguez paused. She thought about all the years of service. All the contributions. All the times humanity had given and given and given, asking only for respect in return. "No," she said, "we will not." The ship crossed the border. As it did, an automated message began broadcasting on all frequencies throughout Council space. It was short and simple. "Earth wishes the Galactic Council prosperity and peace. Farewell." Then the signal cut off. The border went dark. All communication channels with human space fell silent. For the first time in 80 years, there were no human ships in Council territory, no human voices on Council frequencies, no human presence anywhere in the vast network of worlds that made up galactic civilization. Yelen Sorath stood in the Hall of Records, watching her data screens. One by one, the human systems on her map turned gray as they went communications dark. Sol, Alpha Centauri, Tau Ceti, Epsilon Eridani, dozens of colonies, hundreds of stations, Billions of people all disappearing behind a wall of silence. She thought about High Arbiter Kethal's confident words. The humans will return. They always do. But looking at that growing darkness on her map, Yellen felt a cold fear settle in her chest. What have we done? She whispered to the empty room. No one answered. And in human space, behind that wall of silence, humanity began to build a future that did not include the Galactic Council at all. They did not do this out of anger. They did not do this out of revenge. They did it because they had finally accepted a simple truth. You cannot make someone respect you. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much you give, you can only choose to stop giving. And that is exactly what humanity did. The first Void Gate failed 18 months after the humans left. It was the gate connecting the Thessian homeworld to the Council's central trade hub. One day, it simply stopped working. The massive ring structure went dark, and ships that tried to pass through found themselves going nowhere at all. Council technicians rushed to repair it. They had manuals. They had schematics. They had all the technical documents the humans had left behind, but reading about something and understanding it were two very different things. The humans had always made it look easy. They would tap a few controls, adjust a few settings, and the gates would hum back to life. The Council technicians tapped the same controls and adjusted the same settings. Nothing happened. It should work, the chief technician said, staring at his screens in confusion. We are following the exact procedures, but the gates did not care about procedures. They cared about understanding. And the Council had never bothered to truly understand how they worked. Why would they? The humans had always been there to handle such things. Travel times increased overnight. Ships that once crossed half the galaxy in days now took months. Trade shipments were delayed. Medical supplies did not arrive. Food deliveries slowed to a trickle. More gates began to fail. Without proper maintenance, the delicate technology broke down, piece by piece. Some gates could be repaired. Others could not. The network that had connected the Council's worlds for decades started to fall apart like a web with too many broken threads. Then the plague returned. The Thessian plague had been humanity's greatest gift to the Council. Dr. Sarah Chen and her team had developed a cure that saved 3 billion lives. The disease had been declared extinct, wiped from the galaxy forever. But viruses evolve. And without human researchers monitoring the mutations, without human laboratories developing new treatments, the plague found a way back. It appeared first on a small colony world near the Thessian border. A new strain, resistant to the old cure. It spread quickly. By the time anyone realized what was happening, thousands were infected. The Thessians begged for help. They sent messages to every medical facility in Council space. They offered any price for a cure. But the scientists who had cured the plague the first time were gone. The research facilities they had built were empty. The knowledge they had accumulated was locked away in human databases that no one could access anymore. Council scientists tried to develop their own cure. They worked day and night, racing against the spreading infection. But medical research takes time, years, sometimes decades. The plague did not wait. Millions died. Entire cities were quarantined and left to their fate. The Thessian government, once proud and powerful, collapsed under the weight of its own crisis, and that was only the beginning. The Keth Collective had relied on human security forces to patrol their border with the outer reaches. When the humans left, they promised to replace them with their own ships, but the Keth had not fought a real battle in centuries. Their military was more ceremony than substance. The Harrowfang swarm noticed. The Harrowfang were raiders and pirates, vicious creatures who lived for conquest and plunder. For decades, human warships had kept them at bay. The humans had never talked about it much. It was just another job they did, another service they provided. The Council had barely noticed. Now the Council noticed very much. The Harrowfang swept across the Keth border worlds like a wave of fire. Colony after colony fell. Distress signals flooded the communication channels, desperate pleas for help that no one could answer quickly enough. The Council fleet mobilized, but they were too slow. Without the void gates, it took weeks to reach the frontier. By the time they arrived, The Harrowfang had moved on, leaving only ruins and corpses behind. Economic collapse followed. The Council's economy had been built on fast trade and reliable supply chains. Without the gates, without human goods, without stable borders, the whole system began to break down. Prices rose, shortages spread. Species that had lived in comfort for centuries suddenly found themselves struggling for basic necessities. Riots broke out on a dozen worlds, including Varanthos Prime itself. The Council met in emergency session after emergency session. They argued and blamed each other. The Thessians blamed the Keth for supporting the vote against humanity. The Keth blamed the Valanthi for leading the decision. Everyone blamed everyone else, and no one accepted responsibility. Finally, High Arbiter Kethal proposed a solution. "We must send an envoy to Earth," he declared. "We must remind the humans of their obligations to the galactic community. They cannot simply abandon their responsibilities." "Their responsibilities?" Yelen Sorath spoke up. She was no longer a junior archivist. The crisis had forced the Council to promote anyone with useful skills, and Yelen's ability to see patterns had made her valuable. "With respect, High Arbiter, the humans had no obligations. They were observer species. Everything they did voluntarily." Kethal's eyes flashed with anger. "Then we will make them understand that their voluntary service is required. We will offer them whatever they want, membership, trade agreements, whatever it takes. And if they refuse, they will not refuse. They need us." Yelen wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. The Council approved the mission, and a diplomatic vessel was prepared for the journey to Sol. The ship launched with great ceremony. It carried the Council's finest diplomats, loaded with gifts and promises and carefully crafted speeches. It traveled for weeks through the broken network of gates and the empty spaces between stars. Finally, it reached the border of human space, and there it stopped. A small automated beacon floated at the edge of human territory. It broadcast a simple message on repeat: "Human space is not currently accepting visitors. Please leave a message after the tone. Your inquiry will be processed in the order it was received. Thank you for your understanding." The diplomats waited. They sent message after message. They pleaded for an audience. They demanded to speak with human leadership. They offered everything the Council had once denied. No one answered. Days passed. Weeks passed. The diplomatic vessel floated at the border, its crew growing more desperate with each passing hour. They could see the distant light of Sol. So close they could almost touch it, but it might as well have been on the other side of the universe. There was no anger to negotiate with, no demands to meet, no pride to appeal to. There was only silence, vast, impenetrable, and utterly final. The captain of the diplomatic vessel, a veteran Valanthi named Tarask, had spent his career solving problems through negotiation. He had ended wars with words. He had built alliances from nothing. He had never encountered a problem he could not talk his way through. But you cannot negotiate with someone who will not speak to you. You cannot make deals with silence. Tarask sent one final message. "Please, we are dying. Our people are dying. We need your help." The beacon's response was the same as always. "Thank you for your understanding." After 6 weeks of waiting, the diplomatic vessel turned around and began the long journey home. Tarask stood at the observation window, watching the light of Sol fade into the distance. He had come to remind the humans of their obligations. Instead, he had learned a terrible truth. The humans had no obligations. They never had. Everything they had given was a gift, freely offered, and you cannot demand that someone give you a gift. All you can do is watch them walk away and wonder why you never appreciated what you had when you had it. The diplomatic vessel returned to Council space with no agreement, no promises, and no hope. The crisis continued. The dying continued. And somewhere beyond the silent border, humanity lived on without them. They had not slammed a door. They had simply stopped holding it open. And the Council was only beginning to understand what that meant. 2 years after the humans left, Yelen Sorath finally understood everything. She had spent months gathering information. She had read every report, studied every communication log, and interviewed everyone who had worked closely with humans. She had pieced together a picture that no one on the council wanted to see. Now she sat in a small room deep beneath the council chambers, surrounded by a handful of officials who still cared about truth more than pride. They were moderates, reformers, the kind of people who had been ignored for decades while the old guard made decisions. "I know why the humans left," Yelen said. "And I know why they will not come back." The officials leaned forward. Outside this room, the council was falling apart. More gates had failed. The plague had spread to 7 worlds. The Harrowfang had taken a third of the Keth border territory. Everyone wanted answers. Yelen activated a display. Documents and messages appeared in the air, human communications that her team had spent months collecting and decoding. "We always assumed the humans left because they were angry," she said. "We thought this was revenge. We thought they were punishing us for the vote." "Are they not?" asked Delegate Morven, an elderly Thessian who had argued against denying humanity membership. "No," Yelen shook her head. "They are not, and that is what makes this so much worse." She highlighted a message dated 3 days after the assembly vote. It was from Ambassador Elena Vasquez to Earth Command. "Read it carefully," Yelen said. The officials read in silence. The message was short. "The Council has made their position clear. They see us as children playing at being adults. They laugh at our contributions and dismiss our achievements. I have given 30 years of my life to this mission, and I must accept that it has failed. Not because we did not try hard enough, but because they will never see us as equals no matter what we do. I recommend a full withdrawal from Council space, not as punishment, not as leverage, simply because there is no point offering gifts to those who see them as obligations owed." The room was silent. "She wasn't angry," Delegate Morven said quietly. "She was tired." "Yes." Yelen pulled up more documents. "Look at these. Messages between human officials during the withdrawal. There are no plans for revenge, no strategies to hurt the Council. They simply decided to stop trying." She showed them message after message. Human doctors discussing their departure from Thessian hospitals with sadness, not satisfaction. Human engineers writing farewell notes to colleagues they had worked with for years. Human merchants expressing regret that profitable trade relationships had to end. "They did not want to leave," Yelen said. "They wanted to stay. They wanted to be part of our civilization. But we told them, over and over again, that they were not good enough, that they were too young, too emotional, too lesser." She pulled up one final document, a psychological report from a human research institute. Written 6 months after the withdrawal. "This is the most important piece," she said. "Human researchers studied their own population's reaction to the Council's rejection. Do you know what they found?" No one answered. "They found that an entire generation of humans had internalized our message. Young humans who had grown up hearing about the Council, who had dreamed of being part of galactic civilization, had come to believe that aliens would always see them as inferior. The damage was not political. It was psychological. We did not just reject their government. We broke something in their spirit." Delegate Morven lowered his head. "We taught them that they would never be accepted." "Yes. And once they learned that lesson, they did what any rational being would do. They stopped seeking acceptance." The room fell silent again. Outside, they could hear the distant sounds of another protest, citizens demanding answers, demanding solutions, demanding someone to blame. "So what do we do?" asked Admiral Veth of the Council fleet. She was a practical woman who had little patience for politics. "We cannot force them to return. I have seen the military assessments." Yelen looked at her. "What assessments?" Admiral Veth hesitated, then spoke. "The humans always told us they were a peaceful species. They sent peacekeeping forces and merchant vessels. They never threatened anyone. We assumed this meant they were militarily weak, and they are not? No." The Admiral's voice was heavy. "What we saw in Council space was not their military. It was their scouts, their exploration vessels, their civilian contractors." She paused. "Their real fleet never left Sol. Our intelligence suggests they have more warships than the rest of the Council combined. Better technology, too. They simply never showed us. The implications hung in the air like poison. They could have fought us, Morven said. When we rejected them, they could have taken what they wanted by force. Yes, Admiral Veth said, but they chose not to. They chose to leave peacefully instead. Why? Yelen answered. Because that is who they are. They are not the violent, emotional children we told ourselves they were. They are patient. They are disciplined, and they would rather walk away from a fight than become the monsters we accused them of being. The meeting continued for hours. They discussed options, strategies, possibilities. In the end, there was only one conclusion. Someone had to go to Earth in person, not as a diplomat carrying demands, but as a messenger carrying honesty. I will go, Yelen said. The others stared at her. You? Because I am no one important. I carry no authority and represent no one but myself. The humans rejected our diplomats because they saw them as the same officials who rejected humanity. But I am just an archivist. I never voted against them. I never laughed at them. And I am young enough that they might believe me when I say that not everyone in the Council agreed with what was done. They might not let you through the border, Admiral Veth warned. Then I will wait at the border until they do. Or until I die. Either way, I have to try. The room was silent. Then, one by one, the officials nodded. Later that night, High Arbiter Kethal was removed from power. The vote was unanimous. He had led the Council into disaster. And even his allies could no longer defend him. He went quietly, too proud to beg and too old to fight. New leadership took over younger officials, moderate voices, the kind of people who had been warning about this crisis for years. They did not know if they could save the Council. But they knew they had to try. And in a small hangar on Varanthos Station, Yelen Soreth boarded a tiny ship. It was unarmed and carried only basic supplies. She had no backup, no authority, and no guarantee of survival. But she had something else. She had the truth. She had the documented evidence of what the Council had done wrong. And she had something that the Council's diplomats had never brought to the border. She had humility. The ship launched into the darkness. Behind her, the Council's worlds burned with crisis. Ahead of her, the human border waited in silence. Yelen did not know if the humans would listen to her. She did not know if they would even let her speak. But she knew that someone had to make the first honest attempt at understanding. Someone had to admit that the Council had been wrong. Someone had to say the words that should have been said years ago. She just hoped she would get the chance to say them before it was too late. Yelen's ship drifted at the border for 3 days before anyone responded. She had sent her messages. She had explained who she was and why she had come. She had made it clear that she carried no weapons, no authority, and no demands. She had simply asked to speak with someone. On the 4th day, a ship appeared. It was not a warship. It was a rescue vessel, painted bright white with medical symbols on its hull. It approached slowly, scanning Yelen's ship, and then a calm voice came over the communication channel. Valanthi vessel, this is the HSV Mercy. We have received your messages. Are you in need of assistance? Yelen almost laughed. She had come expecting suspicion, hostility, perhaps even violence. Instead, the first human words she heard in 2 years were an offer of help. I am not in distress, she replied. I have come to speak with your leaders. Please. It is important. There was a pause. Then, stand by. Hours passed. More ships arrived, some military, some civilian. They surrounded Yelen's vessel but made no threatening moves. Finally, a new message came through. You have been granted entry to human space. Please follow our escort. Do not deviate from the assigned course. Welcome to the Sol system. Yelen followed the escort ships through the border and into human territory. What she saw took her breath away. She had expected damage. She had expected a civilization struggling to survive after cutting itself off from the galaxy. She had expected darkness and desperation. Instead, she saw light. Human stations gleamed in the darkness of space. massive structures that dwarfed anything the Council had built. Ships moved between them in steady streams, trade vessels, passenger liners, construction craft building ever more structures. The traffic was heavier than anything she had seen in Council space. As she approached Earth, the scale became even more impressive. The planet was surrounded by orbital platforms, shipyards, and habitats. The moon had been developed into a major industrial center. Everything was busy, active, alive. The humans had not just survived, they had thrived. Yelen's ship landed at a spaceport outside a city called Geneva. She stepped onto human soil for the first time, and a small delegation was waiting for her. They were polite and professional. They gave her food, medical care, and a comfortable room to rest in. No one interrogated her, no one threatened her, they simply treated her as a guest. 2 days later, she was escorted to a meeting room in a building overlooking a lake. The mountains in the distance were covered with snow. It was the most beautiful place Yelen had ever seen. A man was waiting for her. He was tall and dark-skinned, with gray hair and kind eyes. He stood when she entered, and offered his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I am David Okonkwo," he said, "Premier of the Human Confederacy. Please, sit down." Yelen sat. She had prepared speeches, arguments, lists of things she wanted to say. But now, facing this calm and patient man, all her prepared words seemed inadequate. "I came to apologize," she said simply, "on behalf of myself, and on behalf of those in the Council who know that what was done to your people was wrong." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, truly. But you should understand something." He leaned forward. "We do not hate you. We never did." "You don't?" "No. Hate requires energy. It requires caring about the other person's opinion of you. We stopped caring about the Council's opinion a long time ago." The words were gentle, but they hurt more than any insult could have. "Then why?" Yelen asked. "Why did you leave? Why did you let us suffer?" Okonkwo sighed. He looked out the window at the lake, where children were playing on the shore. "We left because we realized something important," he said. "You cannot make someone respect you. You can give them everything you have. You can work harder than anyone else. You can solve their problems, fight their battles, and sacrifice your own well-being for their benefit. And they can still look at you and see nothing but a lesser being who should be grateful for what little they allow you to have." He turned back to her. "We tried for 80 years to earn the Council's respect. We gave you our medicine, our technology, our protection. We asked for nothing but a seat at the table, and in return, you laughed at us." "Not all of us," Yelen said quietly. "No. Not all of you. But enough of you." Okonkwo's voice was sad, not angry. When Ambassador Vasquez returned from the assembly, she was not furious. She was broken. She had given 30 years of her life trying to build a bridge between our peoples. And in one moment, the Council showed her that everything she had done meant nothing to them. "I am sorry. I know you are. And I believe you mean it." Okonkwo smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "But here is the problem. The Council did not just reject our government. They taught an entire generation of humans that aliens would always see them as inferior. Children grew up hearing that we were too emotional, too volatile, too young. They learned to expect contempt from the stars." He gestured toward the window. "Those children are adults now. They have families of their own. They have built this civilization with their own hands, without any help from the Council. And now you ask them to forgive, to forget, to welcome back the people who called their parents lesser beings." "I am not asking for forgiveness," Yelen said. "I know we do not deserve it. I am asking for a chance. A small chance to begin again." Okonkwo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "We will reopen limited trade. Medical supplies, basic technology, humanitarian aid. We will not let innocent people die for the sins of their leaders." He held up a hand. "But there will be no ambassadors, no treaties, No integration. The Council will deal with us as distant partners, not as family. Trust, once broken, must be rebuilt slowly. Yellen felt tears forming in her eyes. It was less than she had hoped for, but more than she had dared to expect. "Thank you," she whispered. Okonkwo stood and walked to the window. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you come here yourself? You are young. You have no power. You could have stayed safe in Council space and let someone else take this risk." Yellen thought about the question. She remembered watching the human ships leave, watching the data screens go dark, watching the Council's world start to fall apart. "Because someone had to," she said. "Someone had to be willing to say that we were wrong. Not as a strategy. Not as a negotiation tactic. Just as the truth." Okonkwo turned to look at her. For the first time, she saw something warm in his expression. "That is why I agreed to meet with you," he said. "Because you came with nothing but honesty. That is rarer than you know." Yellen returned to Council space with the agreement. It was not the salvation the Council had hoped for, but it was enough to stop the bleeding. Human medical supplies saved millions of lives. Human technicians helped repair the most critical void gates. Human trade goods filled the worst shortages. The Council survived. Barely. Years passed. The relationship between humanity and the Council remained distant but stable. Trade increased slowly. Communication channels stayed open. No one pretended that things were like they had been before, but no one closed the doors either. 10 years after Yellen's mission, a human trade vessel docked at Varanthos station for the first time since the withdrawal. Crowds gathered to watch, not in mockery this time, but in hope and curiosity. A young woman stepped off the vessel. She had dark hair and her grandmother's calm eyes. She looked around at the alien faces watching her, at the station that had once rejected her people, at the world that was slowly learning to see humans as equals. A Valanthi child pushed through the crowd and waved at her shyly. The woman smiled and waved back. It was not forgiveness. It was not the restoration of what had been lost. Some wounds leave scars that never fully heal, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that is enough.